Hi, and welcome to D8 Squared. Today, I'm going to show you the method that I'm using to paint all the woodwork in my house, all the trim. So, our house is pretty much everywhere is like a stained, varnished, dark wood that we're deciding to do a refresh and paint it all white. So, there's a few steps involved in doing that, and I'm going to go through those. So the first step is to prepare the surface. So this is probably the most important thing that you have to do in the whole project. So the first thing I do to start preparing the surface is I clean it really well. So I've been using this TSP substitute, and what I'll do is I'll spray it on and wipe it down and then rinse it with a wet rag. So I'm gonna spray all the wood surface with the TSP substitute, and then I'm gonna just clean it real good with this wet rag. Wipe it all down good. And I'm going to go around the whole window and do that. So now that I cleaned it with the TSP, I'm going to take my wet rag and I'm going to go through and I'm going to now kind of wipe all that off. So just kind of go around the whole window with the wet rag, cleaning off the TSP. So now that the TSP has been used to clean the surface real well, the next step is going to be to use a deglosser. So I use this liquid sandpaper, and I'll just rub this on with a lint-free cloth. Just kind of like buff it in, rub it in, and that will help to take the gloss off. That will give the primer a better surface to stick to. Now another step of this process, could have been before or after these two steps, doesn't really matter, is to tape off what you don't want paint on, obviously. So I went ahead and did that first. But just as long as you get that done before you start priming, it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to be applying the liquid sandpaper next. So now the liquid sandpaper, you just want to kind of soak a lint-free cloth with it. Get it all nice and soaked on there, and then go ahead and rub that in to your wood. And what this does is it just kind of helps break down the varnish a little, so that the primer will have something to stick to. So just go ahead and do that on all your surfaces. One thing to note with the liquid sandpaper is you do not have to wipe that off. So you can rub that in and it might get a little cloudy and things, but you do not have to clean that off. As a matter of fact, you don't want to clean that off. You want it to have a little bit of a cloudy surface. So once that pretty much dries, then you'll be ready to go on to priming. So this is the primer that I'm using. It's a really good primer. I think it was about $70 a gallon, so it's not cheap. But I mean, this is a very key component to the project, is having a good primer, something that'll stick to your prepared wood well. So now that the liquid sandpaper has dried, I'm going to go ahead and roll on the primer. Now it's not going to look really good. You're still going to see through the dark wood underneath, but that's okay. All we're really trying to do here is get a good layer of material that's going to stick to the wood and to the varnish. So that's okay. And the primer doesn't really go on really nice. So it really looks pretty terrible after just a coat of primer. But once you start getting the coats of paint on, it starts looking a lot better. Now that the coat of primer has dried, you can see it really doesn't look the nicest. You know, at this point, you're probably like, man, did I just wreck all my woodwork? Well, don't worry. This is gonna give a really nice surface for the paint to stick to. And after 2 coats of paint, it's gonna look great. So don't worry. So I'm gonna get ready to put the first coat of paint on now. Now this is the paint that I'm using. Again, this is another Sherwin-Williams paint. This is, I think it's their top of the line paint. It's called Emerald, and it's specific for trim and doors. So I think this is around $100 a gallon. It goes a long ways. You can probably do your whole house with 1 gallon, depending on how big your house is, I guess. But I did not tint it, so I just went with the default white that it comes. I didn't feel any need that it needed to be tinted. So this is the paint that I would recommend you using. So after the first coat of paint, what I like to do is caulk around everywhere in here. This looks pretty good. This is why I wait till after the first coat of paint, because I really don't have to caulk this gap at all. But you get up here in the corner and you can see, you know, up in here, that's gonna look pretty bad if you don't fill that in somehow. Same with these screw holes. Although I don't really care too much about those because my new blinds I put up is gonna cover that up. But out on the outside of the trim, this one isn't too terrible, but sometimes you get this, you know, you get a little bit of a separation from the wall here. That looks pretty bad. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna fill all those gaps with caulk and let that dry. I bought a fast drying caulk. In 20 minutes you can paint over it. This is the stuff I use right here, DAP. And that seems to work pretty good. So I'm just gonna go ahead and fill all that in. Now, this gap right here, I'm gonna wait. That'll be the very last thing I do. After my second coat of paint, I'll peel the tape off and caulk that, but I'll show you that when I get there. So another thing I'm gonna do is fill in any nail holes that became visible since painting. When it's stained, that's a lot more forgiving. So I'm gonna fill all that in as best I can also. So basically I run a bead of caulk all the way down the side. And then I come back with my finger and push that in there. And there you go. Looks pretty good. Now that the caulking has dried, I'm gonna go ahead and paint the second coat of paint. It's already looking pretty good. One more coat should do it. So, but you can see all the gaps are filled in. So now just another second coat on top of that, and it should be looking pretty good. And now I'm rolling on the second coat of paint, which should be our final coat. Can always touch up a few spots if we absolutely need to, but this should do it. Now that the second coat of paint is dry, I'm gonna go ahead and peel off all the tape that I had applied. So some of you might be wondering why, at this point, I didn't tape here, you know, along the edge. Well, it's because our next step of the process is gonna be to paint our walls. So it really wasn't worth the effort to paint here or to tape here, because we're gonna be painting all this anyway. So in any case, now just a matter of removing all the tape and then caulking this this final gap right here against the vinyl window. Okay, now the final step will be to caulk the gap between the woodwork and the vinyl window. Okay, so now that I caulked around where the vinyl window meets the woodwork, we're pretty much done. If there's any areas that you missed on your first, the first application of caulk, you can come back around and do it. But, because the caulk is white and it pretty much matches your paint. So, but I would recommend doing it again after that first coat of paint. But if there is any areas you need to touch up, go ahead and do that now. Otherwise, that should pretty much do it. Thank you for watching this video. I hope it helped you. I hope it helped clarify any questions or issues you have. And again, please leave comments, and thanks for watching.